Chapter 1. The Zoo. Today, Susie Blackmore thought to herself, is going to be another bad day. She was alone in her little flat in West London. It was the end of September 1999, the last quarter of the last year of the century, the millennium, in fact. The sun was coming through the window, and outside the trees were moving slowly in the autumn wind. A bus came along the road, stopped outside the house, and moved off again. Susie listened for a few moments to the traffic sounds outside her window. Life was going on as usual. Slowly, Susie stood up and made herself some tea. She took it back to the table by the window and sat holding the cup. This was no good. She didn't want to do any work. The dream she'd had last night was still with her, following behind her like a ghost. She'd started having bad dreams several weeks ago, the night after her father died. Sometimes in the dreams she was in a place she didn't know. She knew that she had to escape from something. She was very afraid of the dark, deathly thing that was chasing her. Often a voice called her name loudly in her dream, and she woke up. Although it was a dream, she was sure that the voice was real. She finished her tea and looked at her watch. It was just after 10 o'clock. "Come on," she told herself. "Time to go out. Get moving." She found her coat and camera and left a message on the telephone answering machine for her husband, Charlie. "I've gone out to do a job. I'll be back around midday. Leave a message and I'll call you back." The underground station was fairly quiet at this time in the morning. She bought her ticket and waited for the train. Between stations, the train stopped for a few moments, and Susie looked at the other travellers. She studied their faces in the glass in the window opposite. Outside the window, everything was black. She thought of her father again. She tried to see his face in the window glass as well, but his kind eyes and smile didn't come. Had she forgotten his face so soon? She felt a wave of sadness. She'd felt so terrible when she got the phone call from the hospital. It had all happened very suddenly, they told her. Her father went to hospital very quickly by ambulance, but they couldn't help him. The doctor said he was very sorry. Now Susie felt like a small child again, lost in the big adult world. Well, okay, she had Charlie, but that was different. Her mother had died when she was a baby. The only family she had left now were her cousins in Slovenia, but she didn't know her Slovene cousins very well. They phoned her when they heard about her father. It was the first time she'd spoken to them since she was a child. His heart just stopped, she told them. No one could do anything. It was very sudden. She had dreams about her father, too. In last night's dream, he was smiling. "Don't worry about me," he said. "I'm fine." He was back home in the village in Slovenia where he was born. He was having a great time seeing old friends and family. "I'll come and see you as soon as I get home," he promised. Just as he used to when he was alive, every week. In the dream she had thought, "Oh, he isn't dead after all. It was all a terrible mistake." And then she'd woken and remembered. She got out of the train at Regent's Park and walked towards the zoo. This was one of her favourite parts of the city. It was such a different place from the busy world of shops and business and London traffic. She liked to watch the animals as they played, ate, or lay on the ground asleep. The zoo wanted some photographs of the animals. You had to be very good in the photography business, and Susie knew she was good. But that was not enough. She had to work hard taking photographs. At the same time, she had to find new jobs to do. She loved her work, but it was a difficult life. She was beginning to feel tired of it. And now her father was gone. Was it time for a change? For the first time in her life, she wanted a child for her father's lost life. This morning there were not many visitors. She almost had the place to herself, except for the zookeepers who were giving food to the animals. Susie stopped to look at the grey wolves as they walked hungrily up and down. They were like large, friendly dogs, really, not at all wild or dangerous. She remembered the stories her father used to tell her about the Volkodlak. It was a terrible thing, a sort of man-wolf vampire who stole bad children away in the night and drank their blood. When she was little, of course, she thought the stories were true. She smiled as she thought about it. She lifted up her camera. One of the wolves stopped moving and watched her. Susie found herself looking back through the camera. The hair on her skin stood up, and she felt suddenly afraid. She couldn't move. She felt sure that the animal wanted to tell her something. The next thing she knew was that she was lying on the ground. The worried face of one of the zookeepers was above her. "Are you all right, love?" he asked. "I've sent for the doctor." Was all that she could say. Chapter 2. Voice of the Beast.
I sleep with my eyes open. My ears hear the smallest sound, and I wake. If air moves softly over the hairs on my body, I will know that there is a living thing near me. Smells of animals brought by the wind can reach me over hundreds of kilometers. Are you afraid of the dark? You are right to be afraid. We live in the darkness, and there we do our work. You can be sure that we want only what is bad, only what can hurt you. When you are feeling weak, we will know. Then we will watch you while you sleep, waiting for the time when we can take you into our darkness. In the night, we talk to you and call you to come to us. The knock on the door that wakes you in the night, that is one of us, come to invite you to a living death. Do not listen. Close your ears if you want to escape with your life. We have always been here. We have been here from the start of time. Many thousands of years ago, people ate with the gods. At that time, in Arcadia in Greece, there was a man called Lycaon. In Greek stories, Lycaon was the son of the first man on earth. He was the king of the people, who lived on the hills and in the woods of Arcadia. But Lycaon was a bad man, and one day the god Zeus heard about it. So he paid a surprise visit. Lycaon killed a child and gave it to Zeus to eat. Zeus was so angry that he turned Lycaon into a wolf. Lycaon had to leave his people and live in the woods by himself. He was half man and half wolf. The sons of Lycaon, my brothers and I, have been on the earth all this time. But we left Arcadia and traveled the world. Each one of us went alone. We lived in hiding in many different places. Sometimes we showed ourselves to people, but they were terribly afraid of us. They used guns and shot us with silver bullets. They made big fires and burnt us alive and cut off our heads. But we did not die. We just changed into the undead. We move around the earth in many forms. You do not see us, but we are among you. In all parts of the world, from the east to the west, from the north to the south, in Venezuela, France, Mexico and Florida, from the Caucasus to the Alps, from Georgia to Greece, from the icy fields of Russia to the green hills of England. You can hear our cries if you listen hard. They are carried on the hot winds from the south and across the white mountains of the north. There is nothing you can do to escape from us. You may think you can kill us with your silver bullets, but you cannot. We move from one body to another, from one place to another. We need blood and dead meat, and we are always hungry. We will kill anything that lives. Babies, cows, children, sheep, goats, chickens, men, women. How can you know us? Well, what do you think you will see? Sometimes, for example, I am an animal of the night, like a bat, or a wolf, or an owl, or a wild black dog, like the dog that sits at the entrance to the underworld. Sometimes I am the ghost that lies down next to you when you sleep. Or I am a beautiful young man or woman whom you want more than anything else in the world. I am all of these things, and I am none of them. I move between your world and mine as easily as a fish through water. You cannot understand how easily. You may see something moving in the corner of your eye. If you turn to look, there will be nothing there. Just a leaf blowing in the wind, you think. But I am following in the darkness behind you. I am your worst dream.
Chapter 3. A Holiday. "Are you okay?" Charlie asked Susie that evening as they sat in their small kitchen. "You're very quiet." He watched her. Her dark, Eastern European eyes always made her face look white, but today she seemed whiter than usual. There were dark circles under her eyes. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm not sleeping well at the moment, that's all," Susie said. "I keep having these dreams. It was about Dad last night. I thought he was alive again." Her voice shook a little. Charlie felt worried about Susie. Last August, after her father died, she'd seemed lost. She'd looked so ill that Charlie had made her go to the doctor. It was quite usual to feel bad after the death of a parent, the doctor had said. She would be better in a few weeks. He'd given her some pills to help her sleep. But today she seemed almost more afraid than sad, Charlie thought. Susie didn't say any more, and Charlie didn't ask her to talk. He'd always felt that there was a side of her that he could never understand. Although her mother was English, and Susie had lived all her life in London, she still seemed a little foreign. Actually, this was what he'd liked about her in the first place, and now he loved her dearly. But sometimes he felt that he didn't know her. Maybe they needed something else in their lives. A child. Charlie asked himself if a baby would help Susie feel better after the death of her father. He was nearly 30 now, a good age to be a father. "I think we should have a holiday," he said to Susie suddenly. "You know, relax a bit, get away from everything." "Well," Susie started. "We should spend some time together, you know," Charlie said. "We're both always so busy. Sometimes I don't see you for days." Susie looked at him. "Yes, perhaps you're right," she said slowly. "We could find a house in the country somewhere completely different, a long way from London." "Good idea," Charlie said. "What about Wales? I used to go there for holidays when I was a child. There are some lovely little houses up in the hills." "Great. Let's do that," said Susie. "But there are 1 or 2 jobs I need to finish first." "Me too," Charlie said. "I can't get away until after next month. I've got a big show to organise." 2 months later, on a cold, grey Saturday in November, Charlie and Susie were driving along a narrow country road in the Welsh hills. They'd left London early in the morning, and now it was nearly lunchtime. They seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Charlie asked. The last houses had been in a village at least 3 kilometres before. "Yes, I think so," Susie replied, looking again at a hand-drawn map. The road was full of holes, and a thick line of grass was growing down the middle. It led them through a dark wood and down a hill. Just as they started to go up again, a fox came out of the trees. It ran along the road in front of the car. "Hey, look at that!" Susie cried. She'd never seen a wild fox before. "Oh!" Charlie was just as surprised. The fox stopped for a moment and looked with cold interest at the people in the car. Then it continued along the road and suddenly turned to the right. "It's showing us where to go!" Susie laughed. The fox disappeared into the woods just as, through the trees, they could see a dark stone building. Kinghordy House, a painted piece of wood said. At last, their holiday house. Inside, the little house felt cold, and the tall trees outside made it rather dark. The front door opened into a small kitchen. From there, a door led into the sitting room, where there was an old sofa and an armchair in front of a fireplace. Beyond the sitting room was a light, airy room which looked south. Looking out of the window, Susie could see that the ground rose towards a high, round hill. At the foot of the hill there was a small wood, but the top was empty of trees. 2 large birds were flying round and round in the empty sky above the hill. "Charlie, come and look. What are those birds?" Susie called. Charlie looked over her shoulder. "Red kites," he said. "They're very unusual in Britain. You only find them in a few places, and this part of Wales is one of them. They're meat-eaters. There's probably some kind of dead animal down there, which is going to be their dinner." "Oh, what a terrible thought," said Susie. "It says here that the nearest shops are in the village we came through, Llandafid," Charlie told her. He was looking at a piece of paper with information about the house. "And there are a couple of pubs there too." "It's like an icebox in here," Susie said. "How do we heat the house?" "Ah," said Charlie. "It says, the wood-burning fire in the sitting room heats the hot water and all the house. But it's okay." He laughed as Susie's face fell. "It says there's lots of wood already cut outside in the garage." "Let's light the fire then," Susie said. "And I'm hungry. Why don't we go back to the village after that? We can have some lunch in a pub and do some shopping." "All right, good idea." Charlie went out to the car to bring in their suitcases. Susie watched him. His thin blonde hair was falling into his eyes. He was much taller than her. He had a way of moving his head down towards her when he spoke to her. Suddenly, she wanted to cry. These days, the smallest things made her want to cry. Red in the face and hot, Charlie put the last of their suitcases on the kitchen floor. "Oh, that's it, thank God," he said. "What on earth have you got in that one? It's terribly heavy." "Just my camera and things, that's all," she said. "Can you help me with the fire? The wood won't burn." "Why can't women light fires? That's what I'd like to know." Charlie smiled at her. He went into the sitting room, where he found an old newspaper. He began to put pieces of it into the fire. Outside, the birds screamed in the sky, and the wind shook the tall trees. Susie felt cold again. There must be a window open somewhere, she thought, as the air moved softly against her short dark hair.